Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and this is your horoscope and year ahead forecast for Capricorn and Capricorn rising for the entire year ahead of 2023. All right, so my horoscopes are primarily meant to be read relative to your rising sign, although you can also look at them from the perspective of your sun sign, especially if you're born during the day, or your moon sign, especially if you were born at night. So here's the planetary movements calendar that shows where the planets start at the end of the year and how far through the signs of the zodiac they get by the end of the year. These are some of the transits and the dates associated with them that we're going to be talking about during the course of this forecast, just in case you want to refer back to this later for those of you watching the video version of this forecast. All right, so let's start with the very first transit, which is that at the very beginning of the year, for the first 3 months, you're going to be finishing up a Mars retrograde period in your sixth house of work and health. So this is a transit that began way back last August when Mars first moved into the sign of Gemini, which is the sector of your chart or of your life that has to do with health matters and what it takes to maintain good bodily health. And the sixth house is also the place of your chart that has to do with your workplace. People, especially if you find yourself as a superior, people that work in a subordinate position to you, or just your workplace in general. And Mars as a planet can be kind of a contentious planet that can raise the heat and the tension in whatever area of the chart that it's transiting. So this may have been a period where you've had to deal with some health issues or address some issues head on. Or alternatively, it may have been a period where there could have been some contentiousness in your workplace or in your work environment. So the good news is that this transit, by the time we open 2023, is largely going to be wrapping up. So the transit began in August. It intensified in late October when Mars stationed retrograde. And then Mars is going to end its retrograde period and station direct on January 12th. So that's really the last major turning point. And then after that, Mars is just in a cleanup phase all the way until about the 25th of March, when Mars will eventually depart from that sign and the entire transit will be over. So that is one of the opening transits, though, for the first 3 months of the year. Moving on, the next transit that I want to talk about is Saturn is finally departing from Aquarius, and it's completing a 3-year-long transit through your second house of finances, which for many of you may have coincided with a period of consolidation when it comes to financial matters, or in some instances, some surmountable difficulties or even hardships when it comes to finances or possessions since around March of 2020 when that Saturn transit began. That period is going to end here in March of 2023, and you're going to move into a new chapter with respect to your Saturn transits as it moves into your third house. So the third house is the sector of the chart that has to do with topics such as siblings, neighbors, your neighborhood in general, extended relatives such as aunts, uncles, cousins, and sometimes grandparents. Finally, the third house also has to do with short distance travel, such as driving or your car, as well as education and especially communication. So this is going to be a long-term transit, Saturn going through Pisces, that's going to last for the next 3 years through 2026. So this is going to be a period where it comes to communication, where you're going to go through a period of restructuring how you communicate and how you take things that you know or that you've learned, especially from the ninth house of your chart, and how you convey those to other people. You may run into some difficulties or some surmountable issues with communication that could hold back or restrict your communication or ability to communicate in some way, but eventually through great effort and through pushing through those issues, you'll eventually become stronger and more effective as a communicator as a result. You may see some other difficulties arise either in terms of neighbors, siblings, or extended family that are kind of like issues of sometimes that relationship becoming more cold or distant for some reason. But eventually, hopefully by the end of the transit, you'll have worked out some of those issues and it will not be that big of a deal or cease to be much of an issue. But this is going to be a transit that you're going to be experiencing sort of off and on over the course of the next 3 years as Saturn transits through Pisces and goes through your third house. So pay attention to what happens as soon as it moves into that sign in March, because that should start to give you a preview, an idea of what the next 3 years are going to be like in terms of that transit. All right. Other things happening. Pluto is going to dip into Aquarius for just a few months between March and June, March 23rd through June 11th. This is a preview of a much longer term transit of Pluto going into your second house of finances. So this is a period in which there may be more of an intense focus on financial matters during this 3-month period, and it's going to give you a preview of a longer term 20-year transit, because really once Pluto stops going through Capricorn and fully moves into Aquarius in a couple of years, that's going to start a 20-year transit that's going to last all the way through the early 2040s for you. So this initial preview, though, you might want to pay attention to it and see if there's any changes when it comes to financial matters. You may find yourself more intensely focused on finances for some reason, or the acquirement of possessions or money or wealth. You may want to be careful, though, to exercise moderation, because one of the things that Pluto does is it tends to make us go to extremes, or it tends to make little small issues or small things that we focus on and magnify them into much bigger things. So you may find that being part of the process for you of somehow financial matters getting more of the focus or getting sort of blown out of proportion for some reason over the course of this short preview transit of Pluto in Aquarius. But hopefully this is largely a good thing, especially since Saturn by then will simultaneously be departing from your second house. So some of the shortfalls over the past few years should cease to be as much of an issue. All right, so those are some of the more challenging transits. Moving on to some of the more positive transits this year. For the first 5 months of the year, you're going to have Jupiter transiting through your fourth house of home, family, parents, and private life. There's your fourth house there, which is Aries. This transit will begin in December of 2022 when Jupiter goes into Aries here in the next week or so, but then it's going to last all the way through the middle of May of 2023. So this is a period of growth and expansion when it comes to your home and living situation. Some people may either move into a new living situation, or in other instances, they'll move into another chapter of their life in terms of their living situation, and adding something to it that grows and expands and improves their living situation in some way. Other possibilities with this transit, the fourth house is the house that has to do with your parents. So in some instances, this can be a positive or fortuitous event that's happening in your parents' life that somehow indirectly impacts you. Or alternatively, it may just indicate a positive period in the first 5 months of the year in terms of your interactions with and your relationship with your parents, going into a new stage that's relatively positive. So that's a pretty good transit. Immediately after that, we will see in May, once Jupiter departs from Aries, it's going to move into Taurus, and it's going to go into your fifth house. So the fifth house traditionally signifies topics such as children, creativity, pleasure, fun and games, as well as sex, sexuality, and romance in general. So the fifth house in your chart is going to be one of the sectors that's majorly activated this year, not just by this Jupiter transit, which is pretty much going to dominate the entire second half of 2023, but we're also seeing some eclipses in that sector of your chart as well, indicating some major beginnings and endings in this area. So for some people, this can be having a Jupiter transit in their fifth house for the second half of the year can just be a positive period in terms of the topic of romance. For some people, having a major beginning and a Jupiter transit in the fifth house could indicate either having children or the topic of children entering a new crucial turning point in the person's life if they already have children, such as, for example, like their children graduating and going off to college or something like that. But generally speaking, it should just be a good period for the topic of children in general, if you have any, or if that is a topic in your life to an extent. Otherwise, fifth house transits are very good for fun and games and leisurely activities, and you may find yourself needing to focus on some new creative outlet in order to express yourself, or otherwise just engaging in some sort of new leisurely activity, like a hobby, which ends up becoming much more positive and much more supportive and helpful for you as an outlet in your life than you might think at first. So pay attention to that in the second half of the year, especially as soon as Jupiter goes into Taurus, and then it's going to spend the rest of the year all the way through December transiting through that sector of your chart. All right, other positive transits this year. We've got a Venus retrograde that's going to happen this summer, especially between June and October, in the sign of Leo, which is your 8th house of shared resources. So for some of you, the having a Venus retrograde in the 8th house can be about going back and looking at and revising old contacts or connections or contracts with people from your past in order to have it benefit you a little bit more financially. Essentially, this is potentially a positive financial transit because the 8th house is one of the financial sectors of your chart, which usually can indicate things like shared resources with a partner, either a business partner or a relationship partner. It can also signify things like taxes, debt, and loans. But since it's a Venus transit, a positive or a benefic transit, it should be potentially something positive happening in that area of your life, such as a windfall, like a tax rebate, or other things like that. For those of you that are married or that are in partnerships, it may just be a positive period financially for your partner, which ends up indirectly affecting you in some way, as represented by your 8th house. So I think this will be a good transit, especially for those of you with night charts where Venus transits tend to be a little bit more positive. The 8th house can sometimes also have to do with issues surrounding mortality or inheritance. So for some, especially if you have certain natal planets in that sign, it could be a positive windfall financially through an inheritance or something similar to that archetypally. All right, those are the Venus transits. The last major transits that I really wanted to talk about and focus on for this year ahead forecast are the eclipses that are going to be taking place this year, because we're going to see a bit of a shift where the eclipses are moving from the Scorpio-Taurus axis to the Aries-Libra axis during the course of this year, but they're kind of stuck in between for a period. So the first two eclipses, there's going to be one in Aries in your 4th house of home, living situation, and parents on April 20th. So major beginnings and major endings in that area, which kind of complements the Jupiter transit that I already mentioned that's happening in the first 5 months of the year. So again, a major beginning or a major ending in that sector of your life. And then the second transit that's going to happen, or the second eclipse that's going to happen just 2 weeks later, is going to be a Scorpio eclipse in your 11th house of friends and groups. So this could be a major beginning or a major ending when it comes to the topic of friendship in your life, in either starting a new major friendship that ends up becoming important in your life, or potentially in some instances, it could be ending a friendship or having a friendship, like a chapter of friendship in your life come to a close for some reason if you've reached some sort of transition point. So for some of you, this is a topic that you should already have some idea of how that's working out or playing out in your life, because we've already had 2 sets of eclipses in Scorpio over the course of the past year, largely in 2022. So this eclipse, this last eclipse in Scorpio, should be bringing to a close that period of transition that's been taking place over about the past year and a half now when it comes to the topic of friendship in your life. All right, so moving on, the second set of eclipses this year, there's going to be one in October, on October 14th in the sign of Libra, which is in your 10th house of career. And this should represent a major new beginning or a major ending when it comes to your career and your overall life direction. So some people will either start a new job and start a brand new chapter of their life for career at this time when they have a eclipse taking place in their 10th house. Or in other instances, there can be a major ending when it comes to careers, such as going into a period where you retire or you quit one job in order to transition into another. So typically that's how you get both this idea of both an ending, a major ending, as well as a major beginning. So pay attention to that later this year, because that's going to be the first in a series of eclipses in your 10th house. And we're going to see a continuation of that topic through 2024 when we get more eclipses taking place in Libra and Aries in your 10th house of career and your 4th house of your home and your private life and your parents. Finally, the last major eclipse is going to be a Taurus eclipse, which is going to take place also in October in your 5th house of children, creativity, and romance. So that should just affirm some of the Jupiter transits in the second half of the year, where I was talking about growth and expansion in that sector of your chart. And having an eclipse fall there in the 5th should just make that even more important and make some of those events and developments of growth and expansion have much greater long-term impact than you might think at first. So you may have a significant romantic encounter at that time that seems like it should be a relatively passing thing, but instead it becomes something that impacts your life in a much more significant way than you thought at first. Or alternatively, you could start some new leisurely activity or some hobby that seems like a kind of blow-off thing at first, but then it turns out to be something that sticks with you for many, many years past that point. So pay attention to little things like that when it comes to that eclipse, since that's also the closing of a major eclipse series in your 11th house of friends and your 5th house of creativity and fun and games. All right, so I think those are all of the major transits that I wanted to talk about today. So just to summarize, the main keywords or the main areas of your life that are going to be active this year. Early in the year, major area is going to be health and work due to that Mars retrograde transit. Then starting in March, we're going to move into a period where communication, neighbors and siblings is much more of the focus with the Saturn transit. And then home and parents as a major focus this year due to the eclipses and the Jupiter transit, followed by children, creativity, and hobbies due to the Jupiter transit through Taurus in the second half of the year and the eclipse there. And then finally, other themes this year are shared resources, career, and friends. So that covers a lot of topics for you. You have a lot going on this year, but I think at different points in this year, you'll see how those become the main themes when you end up looking back on this year in retrospect once 2023 is over. So it looks like a great year. So thanks a lot for watching this forecast. Thanks everyone who joined me for the live chat today for this live stream. I appreciate it. I'm going to run the credits and then answer a few questions in the live chat as those are going. So thanks a lot for watching. Good luck this year, and I'll see you next year in 2024. Special thanks to all the patrons that helped to support the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on patreon.com. In particular, shout out to the patrons on our producers tier, including Thomas Miller, Catherine Conroy, Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jake Otero, Mimi Stargazer, and Jean-Marie Kaplan. If you appreciate the work I'm doing here on the podcast and you'd like to find a way to support it, then please consider becoming a patron through our page on patreon.com. In exchange, you can get access to bonus content that's only available to patrons of the podcast, such as early access to new episodes, the ability to attend the live recording of the monthly forecast episodes, our monthly auspicious elections podcast, or another exclusive podcast series called the Casual Astrology Podcast, or you can even get your name listed in the credits at the end of each episode. For more information, visit patreon.com/astrologypodcast. If you're looking to get an astrological consultation, we have a list of recommended astrologers at theastrologypodcast.com/consultations. The astrologers on the list are friends of the podcast that have been featured in different episodes over the years, and they have different specialties such as natal astrology, electional astrology, synastry, rectification, or horary astrology. You can get a 10% discount when you book a consultation with one of the astrologers on our list by using the promo code AstrologyPodcast. The astrology software that we use and recommend here on the podcast is called Solar Fire for Windows, which is available for the PC at alabe.com. Use the promo code AP15 to get a 15% discount. For Mac users, we recommend a software program called Astrogold for Mac OS, which is from the creators of SolarFire for PC, and it includes both modern and traditional techniques. You can find out more information at astrogold.io, and you can use the promo code ASTROPODCAST15 to get a 15% discount. If you'd like to learn more about my approach to astrology, then I'd recommend checking out my book titled Hellenistic Astrology, The Study of Fate and Fortune, where I go over the history, philosophy, and techniques of ancient astrology, taking people from beginner up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. You can get a print copy of the book through Amazon or other online retailers, or there's an ebook version available through Google Books. I also recently published a new translation of the anthology of the 2nd century astrologer Vedius Valens, which is one of the most important sources for understanding the practice of ancient astrology. You can find that by searching for Vedius Valens, the anthology on Amazon or other online book retailers. If you're really looking to expand your studies of astrology, then I would recommend my Hellenistic Astrology course, which is an online course on ancient astrology where I take people through basic concepts up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. There's over 100 hours of video lectures as well as guided readings of ancient texts, and by the time you finish the course, you will have a strong foundation in how to read birth charts, as well as make predictions. You can find out more information at courses.theastrologyschool.com. I also recently launched a new course there called the Birth Time Rectification course, where I teach students how to figure out your birth time using astrology when the birth time is either unknown or uncertain. You can find out more information about that at theastrologyschool.com. Each year, the podcast releases a set of astrology calendar posters for the coming year, and we've just released our 2023 planetary alignments and planetary movements posters, which are now available on our website at theastrologypodcast.com/store. There you can also pick up our 2023 electional astrology report, where Lisa Scheim and I went through the next 12 months and we picked out the single most auspicious date for each month using the principles of electional astrology. You can get that at theastrologypodcast.com/2023 report. And finally, thanks to our sponsors, including the Mountain Astrologer magazine, which is a quarterly astrology magazine which you can read in print or online at mountainastrologer.com. Finally, thanks also to the Northwest Astrology Conference, which is happening May 25th through the 29th, 2023, just outside of Seattle. This year's conference is going to be a hybrid conference where you can either attend online or in person. Find out more information at norwac.net.